Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So today's episode is childhood. I feel like I want to give, only fair, equal opportunity that I gave motherhood and fatherhood, so I'm doing childhood. I have to say before we even begin that this isn't just going to be a happy, frivolous episode. It's more that I've been thinking about when I was a child, how I raised my children, how my grandchildren are being raised, how I'm observing other people and how they're raising their children. And so it just got me to thinking that this would be a really important episode. And so we'll see where it goes, everybody. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying that I was thinking about when Jesus was a child. You know, we only really hear about Jesus as a child 3 times in the Bible. One is when he's born, one is when he's presented in the temple, and one is when his parents lose him for a little while and they find him, in learning and teaching in the temple when he was missing for a few days. So those are the 3 times we hear about him. But I do often wonder, what kind of child was Jesus? Even though we only hear about him 3 times, obviously he was being very well taken care of by Mary and Joseph, and I would imagine he was a very reverent child. I would just think that. But one of the things that I got to thinking was even God allowed Jesus to be a child. He didn't, have him out and about. He didn't have him where we talk about it in the Bible. I think in my opinion, God was allowing Jesus to be a child because he knew that he was preparing him for this big ministry that he was about to do, obviously the most important person in our history. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that, even Jesus was allowed to be a child. What Jesus says about children in the Bible are this. At that time, the disciples approached Jesus and said, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a child over, placed it in their midst, and said, "Amen, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself, like this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one child, such as this, in my name, receives me." That was from Matthew 18. Also from Matthew 18, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, but I say to you that they are angels in heaven. Always look upon the face of my heavenly Father." From Mark 10, "And people were bringing children to him that he might touch them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he became indignant and said to them, 'Let the children come to me. Do not prevent them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Amen, I say to you, whoever does not accept the kingdom of God like a child will not enter it.' Then he embraced them and blessed them, placing his hands on them." I think those are very interesting because Jesus was putting value on children, and back in Jesus's day, children weren't as valued as they are today, which I also think is interesting. Anyway, I have some questions for you. What kind of childhood did you have? Was it magical and fun and beautiful? Or was it scary and stressful and sad? What made it these things for you? Or was it a person that made your life special and amazing, or a person who stressed you out and pressured you? Was there a situation or encounter that scared you or made you sad? Were you in a family that was together or broken apart? Are you a child of divorce? Or maybe one of your parents died when you were young or even older and it really affected you. Were you adopted? If so, what was that like? Were you abandoned or ignored? Did you have lots of extended family around you, or did you live at a distance from them? Did you get to spend lots of time with your grandparents? And what value did you get from that? What did you want to be when you grew up? Did it happen? Did you get to be that? And if not, why? Did you get time to play and imagine and just be a kid? Or did you have to help with siblings or for your family business? Were you rebellious, or did you follow your parents' rules? Did you have lots of friends, or were you a loner? Did you attend church regularly? And if so, did you enjoy it? Did you even understand what was going on, or was it explained to you? Did how you were parented affect how you parent your children? I think all these are really good questions to ponder and really consider and think about them. As I was coming up with these, I was certainly thinking about my childhood. I've talked in a few episodes how magical and wonderful my childhood was. It really was. Of course, my two parents were married the entire time. My brother and sister and I are from the same parents. And even though my brother and sister were older than I was, we were a family, and we didn't have to divide our time between parents outside the home. I just was allowed to be a little child and play, and I was involved in many sports and activities and brownies and Girl Scouts and things like that. I was raised in a neighborhood where we were all very close friends. We didn't really venture out at that time in the world. We all just kind of, played with neighborhood friends. It was just an idyllic childhood in a small town, and I just really value that. But again, I've said in another episode, my childhood abruptly ended when I was 13. And in some ways, I think, a childhood can kind of start phasing out at age 13. You're becoming a teenager. And I think that that's kind of a rite of passage time for some things, not all things, but some things. And I just felt my childhood abruptly ended too soon, in my opinion. And, you look back on things and go, gosh, I wish this would have been done differently, or I would have handled this differently, or my parents would have handled something differently. But it is what it is. I can't go back and change it. But what that helped me to do when I became a mother was say to myself and to their father was, I don't want to do certain things with them that my parents did. I want to give some more rules and guidelines. I want them to be able to come to me or us and ask us any question and get information from us directly, not very good sources. I felt like I was just finding out things on the streets, as I called it. If I would go to my mom and ask her a question, she was so horrified. She's a very proper British lady, so she, would just get very disheveled when I would ask her any questions. So consequently, I would just go out on the street and ask questions, and that made me grow up too fast. So when my children started, preteen, I remember telling them, you come to me with any question, I will always answer you. I will give you the actual answer. It might be embarrassing to you, but I won't even look at you when you ask me. I'll look the other way and you can ask me. But you will know when you ask me a question, I will give you the actual answer and you can count on it. They'd ask me the question. I'd say, do you really want to know the answer? And they would sometimes cringe and say no, and they'd walk away because they knew I was going to probably be pretty graphic. But most of the time they'd close their eyes and say, yes, just tell us the answer. So they could always, count on me that I would answer them honestly and give them a straightforward answer. I just felt like I grew up too fast, and I think that was unfortunate. it makes me wonder how the rest of my life would have been if I would have just been allowed to kind of go through the process of being a child, then being a young teenager, and maybe having some more rules and guidelines. I really didn't have that many rules, to be honest with you, and it wasn't smart. That also being said, I feel like my children were children for a very long time. They had each other to play with, and they would draw and play and pretend and, imagine and do all these things together. So I felt like even in the midst of a lot of trauma and drama that was happening, they were little children, and they got to play and we did have them involved in sports and, scouting and things like that. So I felt like, they led a very happy little childhood. So I feel like this is where I don't want this to get dark, but I'm just going to say that, I am very worried and troubled for our children in the world today. I realize there has always been trouble in the world. I realize that, nothing, since the fall of Adam and Eve, there's no perfect world anymore. I understand that. But I do have to say that I think things used to be way more simple back in the day. I realize, of course, there's always been war. There's always been some sort of substance abuse in the world. I realize there have been, the bad guys. There have been, pedophiles, kidnappings, things like that, child abuse, certainly. I'm not pretending for a second that the world used to be this idyllic place with no problems and no stresses, and then all of a sudden now we live in this chaotic world. I'm not saying that. But I do think because of different things going on in the world, it is way more amplified. It's way more available. And that to me is very troubling and very concerning. I feel like our children are growing up more and more quickly as time goes by. I think they're being thrown into things they shouldn't be thrown into. I don't think parents are monitoring their children at all how they should be. And there's, a way to give your child freedom and autonomy while still protecting and guiding them. I remember my daughter told me when she was an adult, and she was already a mother, I believe, she said to me, Mom, you were a really good mom when we were growing up because you would allow us to go do things and have fun, and you let us be children, but you definitely knew where we were, what we were doing. You pretty much had your thumb on us. And she said, that gave us safety and security. That's exactly what I did. I would, I would want to know who they were going somewhere with. Where were they going? I would check on them frequently. I would even do something where they would say they were going to a friend's house, and I would just, show up at the friend's house a couple hours later, and my daughter would go, "What are you doing here?" And I'd say, "I'm just seeing if you're here." I was very honest about it. I didn't make up an excuse and go, "Oh, you forgot your sweater." I'd say, "I just wanted to see if you were here," so that then it made them a little more accountable. Like, "Oh, well, we better be where we say we're going to be because my mom might just show up, I did let my kids do a lot of things, but I definitely kept an eye on them because I learned from when I was a teenager or a preteen, I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Nobody ever came to check on me. Nobody ever called to see if I was where I was supposed to be. I don't know that made me feel good. I think that almost made me feel like, oh, I guess they don't care where I am, so I might as well do whatever I want. That's not good. So, I think we just are, we just have to be careful with these kids today. I don't think children have as much respect for the adults in their lives anymore. Let's get some control back of our families, like this is scary, what's happening. I also feel like the world is more and more being filled with spoiled brats. I hate to use that term, but it's like people are kind of throwing temper tantrums. It's like they want to get their way. So if somebody doesn't get their way, they're just going to be a spoiled brat. And these tantrums are becoming on a huge scale. This isn't just a matter of a little child sitting in a corner holding their breath, waiting for mommy and daddy to give them a lollipop. It's a big deal now, and it's something to be very concerned about. And if we don't start teaching, our children at a young age to respect us, authority, and having the respect of people who have more wisdom than you. A child doesn't have all that wisdom yet, and them demanding certain things shouldn't make a parent just cave to it. Certainly, social media is becoming a widespread problem. Social media certainly can have, very positive things about it, but it definitely needs some, pretty good parameters. And I know even adults have a hard time with that. I'm often wondering, what is the benefit of children having a cell phone and a device? I'm just curious. Like, what is the benefit? Is it, it started out, little Johnny needs to have a cell phone for safety purposes. Okay, so give little Johnny a cell phone where it's just for phone calls and make it very simple. He can't have access to anything else. He doesn't need social media. He doesn't need access to any of that. So I just kind of don't get the benefit. Is it so that they can fit in with their friends? Is that it? Because if that's the only reason, is that worth it? I'm not too sure. Social media for children also, I feel like it robs them of their childhood. They're so busy on their phone, their devices, that they aren't really learning these days how to interact with people face to face. Now it's like children's faces are so stuck in their devices that when you actually go to talk to a child face to face, they kind of look at you with this look like, are you talking to me? I don't know what to do with you. You're not on a screen, and that, they're turning into like little zombies, or they just kind of tilt their head and look at you with these big eyes like, what is this you're doing? It's called a conversation, children, but they're not learning to really communicate properly. I'm also concerned that they're not finding joy in actually doing things. They're watching people do things on TikTok. They're watching people doing things on Instagram, but what are they actually going to do? What are they doing in the world? And whatever they're doing, are they doing it for fun and to have fun as a child? Or are they doing it to take pictures to put on social media, to show their friends what they're doing? It's like, put the phone and device down and go play. Go be a kid. Go interact. Go roller skating. Go skateboarding. Go surfing. Go to the beach. Have fun. You don't always need to be looking in the phone and in the device.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism, new generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions, changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
If a child is only learning things from their device and they're not going out into the world and doing things in actual time, they can't possibly figure out who they are. They can't have experiences that are going to shape them into who they're supposed to be. If I look back over my life, I was very, involved in all these different things. And if I would have just been watching all those things on a computer screen and not doing them for myself, I couldn't say, oh, I love tennis, or, I don't particularly like this other sport. I had to learn it and do it myself. And then, there's good and bad that comes with everything. But that's how, you turn into the person you're going to be. You can't certainly experience that sitting in your bedroom, shades drawn, staring at a computer screen. That's not how you're going to, turn into who you're going to be. Also, social media is causing our children and us as adults, honestly, to have unrealistic expectations about, what's out in the world. It's like a child thinks, oh, well, gosh, if I'm playing with toys as a kid, I'm going to get teased or mocked because I'm a baby or a little kid, And it's like the expectations of what people are showing on social media isn't very accurate. I remember a few years ago, my stepdaughter, one of her friends who was very young girl, beautiful little girl, for whatever reason, I was following her on social media because, she was my daughter's friend and I was just, interested in what they were all doing as these little girls. She was one of the first girls I noticed that just morphed into this very early teenager. And I thought, is that the same little girl that, I was seeing like a month ago? And it was just kind of shocking and horrifying to me that that's how quickly that happened and that's what she was putting out there. At that moment, I decided, okay, I don't want to be following this little girl anymore. Suddenly, I felt like I was too deep into her life and it kind of freaked me out. So, just kind of consider that people are out there watching your children that you don't even know are watching them, and that's not good. I feel like the social media and the devices give all sorts of people access to your children. And when did that become okay? Look at it this way. Let's say a man was peeking in your daughter's bedroom window. Think about that for a minute. Would that be okay with you? I don't think so. So what's the difference of your child, your daughter, your beautiful, precious daughter, holding a device and people are watching her and know where she is? They can find out her location. They can know exactly where she is. What's the difference of that? Only it's in a more, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it just like shocks me when you think about it in those terms. That at one point, we were horrified if a man was peeking in our daughter's window, or a man would be waiting outside of your daughter's school, and approach her. But nowadays, so some stranger wants to meet your daughter at Starbucks and you don't have any knowledge of it, and that's okay. But back in the day, it wasn't okay that these other things were going on. So think about it in those terms. You as the parent are in charge of monitoring what they're doing. Back in the day when we first started with computers, I remember we had a computer in our home and we had it kind of tucked over to the side because of course the computer table wasn't very nice looking. And so I pushed it over to the side. This was new to us and we weren't thinking clearly. And my son Taylor used to be on this computer all the time. And we found out very quickly that he was looking at things he should not be looking at, like most boys his age would typically be doing. Back in the day, it was maybe, a Playboy. This was now a computer. It was a similar idea. So when I became wise to this, his dad and I took the computer, the family computer, and plopped it right in the center of the house where no matter who was on that computer, everybody was walking by it. So you kind of couldn't hide anything. So it took us a while, but we figured that out. So we had to kind of be on top of what our children were looking at and what they were watching. And somebody could be looking over your shoulder and you wouldn't even know it. So it made you more accountable. But nowadays, with everything access on cell phones, you can hide that very easily. People can easily hide what they're looking at. But there's this beautiful thing called history, and you can look back at history of things. So if you really want to monitor what your children are looking at, you can certainly go back and see what they're looking at. And if it's not something appropriate, put parameters on it. There's blocking you can do on your computer and on their cell phones. Monitor what they're looking at on their Instagram. If you must give them a phone and you must give them a device, I feel you must monitor it regularly. They don't have rights to be looking at whatever they want to. They just don't. And this might not be a popular opinion, but when your child is living in your home under 18, they don't have any rights. I'm sorry, they don't. That is your child, your house. They don't have a right to be bringing pornography into your home. They don't have a right to be sneaking drugs and alcohol into your home. They don't have a right to be misusing your house, because if for some reason the police show up at your house and they find drugs on your property, guess who gets in trouble? You do, not the child. So you need to be the parent. You need to be involved in what they're doing and keep on track of it. So what's the answer to all this? What is something that, let's shift our thinking. What is there any good news in this? Is there any way to, figure out how we can allow our children to be children, allow them to have a good memory of their childhood so that then they can be good parents? Is there hope in this? Yes, of course there's hope in this. I think it's going to take a big team effort. It's really hard if you as a parenting team have a plan of we're going to limit our child's social media. We are going to start, having more rules and guidelines and boundaries. It's hard when other parents aren't kind of doing it at the same time. I remember my daughter, she came to me one day and she said, I got invited to a birthday party. I said, great. Now, mind you, she was around 10 or 11. Got invited to a birthday party. Great. When and where is it? It's on this street and it's going to be a sleepover. I said, okay, fun. And she said, it's going to be in the front yard. I said, what's going to be in the front yard? She said, the sleepover. I said, nope, you're not going to that sleepover. And she goes, but Mom, they're all going. I said, I'm not going to let you sleep out on the front lawn. I said, that's like putting a $3 million bag on the front lawn and saying, please don't take this bag of money. I said, you're not going to do that, but everybody else's mother is letting them go. And I said, then clearly they don't love their daughter as much as I love you. Now, I don't know if that was true, but that's what I said to her. And I didn't let her go. And she was not very happy with me. But in the scheme of it, I had to make that decision. And I had to make sure that, I was sticking with what I wanted to do for her safety. So it's hard when other parents have very loose boundaries. It's hard when other parents allow their children to grow up too fast. But be strong. Be strong for your child. Be that safety and that security. Be the one with the calm, cool, level head. The child can't do that. Other people's parents aren't your child's parents. That's not their job to take care of your child. It's your job to give them a happy, healthy childhood where they can feel safe and secure. Another thing that needs to happen that is surely missing from our world today is God needs to come back into your child's life. Attend church regularly. Make it a priority. Go as a family. Make it something to look forward to and value. If you have a good attitude about going, your children will. If you moan and groan about going to Mass every Sunday, your children are going to think it's a horrible thing. If you make it into something like, this is going to be beautiful and wonderful, and we're going to get so much out of this, and everybody gets up and they're prepared to go, and everybody looks nice and feels great, and you go to Mass, it really starts off your day and your whole week with a very good positive attitude. If possible, send your child to Catholic school. I think that at Catholic school, they teach better morals and respect for each other and adults and the world at large. I work at a Catholic church. My office is directly over two Catholic schools, so I'm observing the children at these schools. And I just have to tell you, I'm so abundantly impressed with how the children behave, how they act when people aren't watching and when they are. How they act to their adults and each other is just, it's a thing to marvel at. I'm sure it's not like that in every Catholic school. I'm not saying that, but I can promise you the things I have observed, I would never think I would see in a secular public school, ever. The teachers, the staff, the parents are all on the same team with these guidelines at the Catholic school. So I know it's a financial burden, but it's something that I think people should really try. If I had raised my children Catholic and I had the knowledge of what a Catholic school would provide, I would no doubt send them to Catholic school. I think it's the best decision ever. And if you can't do that, my second choice would be to homeschool your kids today. I used to be very opposed to homeschooling. My dad was a teacher, so he was a big advocate of school. He thought the school experience was important so that a child would have to learn lots of life skills and lots of street smarts and common sense. And you would have to kind of get down and dirty sometimes, and you weren't protected all the time by, the buffer of, being at home being schooled. So I used to really believe that, and I still believe that to a certain degree, that children need to, have a resilience out there in the world, and they learn that at school. But nowadays, I think the world is a scarier place. And I think if you teach them at your home, you have way more control over what they're learning. You can certainly get together with other homeschool groups so that they do need to interact with other children. You can get them involved in groups like art classes, sports. You can get them involved in scouting. There's plenty of things they can do to where they could still be well-rounded, but protected in your home so that they're not being exposed to things that the government and the school is just allowing to have in our school system now, where you have no control over it as a parent anymore. I'm sorry to say, they have stripped you of that right to say, I don't want my child to be a part of this class today, or I don't want that book in the library. Then you're labeled a bigot or phobic of some sort. And it's more about that you are the parent, and you should be, allowed to guide and teach your children in what you want them to learn at their level, at what you feel comfortable with teaching them. There's certain things that children don't need to know until they're of a certain age, and that's up to the parent to decide, not the school and the government. So, I think if you homeschool them, then you get to be in charge of what your children are exposed to and learning. Back to the good news. What can you do to give your child more of a happy childhood with all this crazy danger in the world? How can you, just kind of cushion them and buffer them and teach them so that they won't think the world is just a deep, dark, scary place? Well, like I said, of course, put God back in your life, go to church, and spend more time with your child. One-on-one time with them, I think, is a beautiful thing. Find things that you have in common with one or more of your children. Like, oh, my son and I, we like to go play basketball together. But then my daughter and I, we like to go and do pottery together. Things like this, where it's like, then you have these one-on-one times with your children, and it's good quality time. I know it's hard in this day and age if parents have 2 jobs and it's hard to spend time. But guess what? You're just going to have to schedule it in. You're going to have to make time for your children. I know I had the luxury of being a stay-at-home mom the entire time my children were being raised. Part of that had to do with my disability. I couldn't have a job, but my husband and I looked at it as, okay, well, your job is to stay home with the children and thrive in that and embrace that and love it. And I did. And what I would do is, while they were in school, I would get everything done I needed to get done household-wise, so that when they got out of school, they were my number one focus. I wasn't doing other things. I wasn't, going and doing things with my friends, or that wasn't when I was exercising. That wasn't when I was cleaning. Although my children would say I was cleaning all the time, but I definitely made sure I was very focused on what they were doing when they got home from school. And consequently, I think that made them feel extra valued and extra, secure and safe. Teach them how to have good manners. Teach them how to interact with people of all ages and all types of people. Teach them to be friendly and engaging with people. Teach them to volunteer for things. That teaches them to not always think about themselves, to think about other people, and not to always get paid for everything. Volunteering means you're giving your time and your energy to somebody else who needs it. It's not always about, well, what do I get out of this? Teach your child to be charitable and to volunteer. That will help them to be a good citizen in the world. That will help them to realize the world isn't just about themselves, it's about others. And that's how we build a loving, kind, sympathetic, empathetic world. And that's what we need more of. We're living in such a selfish world. Teach your child to be selfless. Be good role models to your children as parents. So, I think it's really important for a dad to teach their son how to be a good man and father. Things that, we can't just expect our boys to know different things about how to be a good father someday. So as a man, you should be teaching your sons that. As a mother, you should be teaching your daughters how to be a good wife and mother, whatever that means to you, whatever those things mean to you as parents. It's not for me to tell you, it's what you value as a dad and a man. What do you value as a woman and a mother? So, kind of teach those things to your children. Then that being said, swap. Mothers, teach your sons how to be a good husband. What do you value about their dad? Like say, gosh, your dad was always so respectful of me, and I expect you to be really respectful of women and your girlfriend and treat them with respect and dignity and value them and, give them their space and don't, push yourself on them. And then same with men with their daughters. Give your daughter value. Make them know that, they should be presenting themselves respectfully to men. So teach them these things. That's how they're going to learn, and they're going to feel safe because it's their own parents telling them. But the more valued your children feel, the more, they're going to be really good adults in the world. Also, I really encourage parents to find out over a span of time, like, what is your child into? What are they into? Whatever that is, help them ignite that. If they're really into art, for example, my youngest son was really into art, make sure they have art supplies, encourage them, give them a space where they can create. Maybe help them get into an art show, take them to museums to see art, help them with art classes, things like that. If your child is really into a sport and they want to be into the sport, it's not just mom and dad saying, well, we really want you to do this sport. What sport does the child want to be in? What musical instrument does the child want to play? Not just what mommy and daddy want them to do. And then really find out, what do they want to do with that? I remember I went through a phase I wanted to be an airline stewardess. I was obsessed with being an airline stewardess. So my dad really got involved in making this plan for me. And I just felt like that was really exciting. Now, I didn't end up doing that, and that's okay. But, I felt support for whatever I wanted to do. I would be really interested in things and I would go out and actually do them. And so try to really encourage your child and, communicate with your child, get to know your child. So it's not you living vicariously through your child or you dictating everything your child's doing. Find out what they want to do. If they're a boy and they want to do cooking classes, do that with them or teach them how to cook. If your daughter wants to do, something that's typically a boy thing, do that. Doesn't mean she wants to be a boy. It doesn't mean he wants to be a girl. It means that they have interests that are perfectly fine. All interests are to be explored. And then people can decide, oh, actually, I don't care for cooking. I'd prefer to be a baker. Or, find out what it is, embrace it, and allow them to to turn into whatever amazing thing they want to turn into. Back to growing up too fast. So I have this story that I really like to refer to because at the time I hadn't really thought it out, but now I refer to it quite a lot. So my daughter Kaylee, when she was about, I think she was in 6th grade, she still really liked to play with toys and Barbies and things like that. So Kaylee comes to me one day and she says, I would like to get rid of all my dolls and toys out of my room. And I said, why? And she said, because they're for babies and I just don't want to do them anymore. And I said, okay. And so I took everything out of her room and put it in my bedroom. Kaylee's very strong-willed and stubborn at times. And so this went on for 3 days, I believe. And she, she was going to show me. She didn't need those toys. And so she comes to me about 3 days later and she said, I would really like my toys back now. And I said, oh, really? Why's that? And she goes, I don't know. I really would like them back. And I said, okay. So I drew her a picture. So envision this in your mind, all of you. I drew one vertical line on one side of the paper and one vertical line on the other opposite side of the paper and a horizontal line straight across. About a very small fourth of the way, I drew another vertical line on the left-hand side, and the rest was just the long line. And I said, Kaylee, this side over here is how long you are a child, and the rest is when you're an adult. I said, you're a child a very short amount of time in your life, and you will spend the rest of this time wanting to be back as a child. So enjoy your childhood, have it as long as you can, and when it's time to become an adult, because then you'll have children and you can go back and enjoy childhood again through their eyes. So you get a second chance. And when you become a grandparent, you get to do it again. So I believe that God does that for our life, where you're a child, enjoy it. Then you become an adult, and you need to become an adult, but then children will let you go back and relive your childhood in a different way. And it's so much better. So thanks for listening today. Next week's episode will be on the topic neighborhood, how to love your neighbor, and how the neighborhood in our world is becoming a blurred line as well. So please tune into that next week. And again, thank you for all your support. I so much appreciate you. Thank you to the people who are rating my podcast and sending me messages and following me on Instagram and sharing with their friends. And I just, I'm so grateful, and I look forward to next week's episode. Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh. Fresh Catholic is recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios at the Castle at Pierpont in Ventura, California. My producer and engineer is Sarah Espel, and she could be yours too. Our podcast studio is available for rent. You can reach us at wondermouse.us or freshcatholic.com.